Yeah. We've talked about a lot of user cases and a lot of big companies that use Prometheus, and we are not. So I'm going to explain. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm not even an expert on Prometheus, not even on monitoring. But I'm going to tell you how we started to use it and how we are using it, which is not perfect. And I'm here to learn a lot from you guys. But I think it's interesting to, well, I will explain later. So this is me. I'm a software developer at ShuttleCloud. I'm not really active on Twitter, but you should definitely follow ShuttleCloud on ShuttleCloud Engineering, and we post a lot of some technical discussions because we do some learnings, and it's interesting. Give it a try. Who we are? We are ShuttleCloud. We are a startup founded in Techstars. It's an incubator in New York City. You might know it, and we were part of it in 2011. We have offices in Chicago and Madrid, and it sounds big, but we are actually 15 people and 6 engineers. So that's it. We basically offer an API for our customers to import email and contacts. That's the main idea. And our customers usually are ISPs, email and address book providers. Those are some examples. Before, we migrated a lot of EDUs like Harvard and Stanford University. We have some ISPs as customers like Time Warner Cable or Comcast. And even Google is a customer of ours, which we're really proud of it. And some facts, because it's always good to share some facts. Gmail has already imported 3 million users using our API. We have SLAs of 99.5% availability, so we have to be really available, and we've fulfilled them, so good for us. We move around 6 terabytes per hour, and more than 12,000 migrations per day, 12 million emails per day, 2.5 million contacts per day. Well, those are the numbers. And we support 247 providers. So source and destination, we move email and contacts from source and destination from 247 different providers. Those are the numbers. That's it. But as I mentioned, we are only 6 engineers, and we're not really, we only have someone that's more technical in DevOps. But yeah, we do, all of us, we do a little bit of everything. So what do you expect from this presentation? I will do first some disclaimers. And I will let you know what we had on the very beginning before we had even a monitoring system, so Prometheus, and what we did first with Prometheus and how everything we did wrong and why we did it, and how we revamped everything, what we have right now, and the things we have on our backlog or that we're still working on and things we want to improve. The disclaimers, first, I didn't do everything I'm going to explain, so we were 6 people, and all of us, we did different things with Prometheus monitoring and everything, but I'm just here to explain you the whole picture. Obviously, and there are a lot of, you guys know more than about Prometheus and everything I'm going to explain more than I, so I'm not here to tell you how to do things, because actually I'm to tell you what we did wrong, and you guys should tell me how we should do things. And third, yeah, I love memes. Sorry about that. I actually removed a lot of them because there were too many. But yeah. What do we have in the very beginning? So we were starting. We had some instances. We were starting to get more projects, and we didn't have a monitoring system. The first thing we needed was to know if everything was if a machine was up and down, and we had some of automatic scripts, Chrome-based, that sent us emails, and that was what we had in the very beginning. For our front ends and to monitor externally as a black box monitoring, we had Pingdom, which was fine. Well, it actually tells you if you're up, and if it's working, it does its checks, and also you get emails if you're not. And we had a dashboard where we could see how we were performing, like how many migrations we're receiving, how many migrations were getting through, how many status we're getting, and if something went wrong, like in this picture, we received an email. I'm going to explain you a little bit how we got those metrics, because this will explain, or this will give you some reasons why we decided to do things wrong with Prometheus as we did. So how we got this, every single migration we receive has different operation, and every single operation, every single status is recorded in a non-relational database. In our case, CouchDB. And we have sort of a huge database with all statuses for all migrations. Obviously, different projects have different databases, so not all together on the same one, but yeah. This gets processed by a service we we created, which we called the status importer, and sort of pre-processed all metrics to get some metrics that could be queried in a MySQL, in a relational database. And we needed some email reports for do monthly reporting, so not really monitoring, but reporting. So we had sort of a service that created that did and calculated with the queries all metrics, and with different views that push that metrics to this dashboard you've seen with a dashboard publisher and to the email reports we had. Yeah, so we had something and we knew that it was not perfect. So as projects we started to get more projects, more migration, and obviously the SLAs, we definitely needed a monitoring system. So one day we decided, well, now one of the priorities, we need to get that monitored. We need a monitoring system. And here's where Prometheus comes from. Not that Prometheus, someone had to do that joke, I'm sorry. I was the first one. So why Prometheus? Actually, we asked our DevOps, asked in the community, and we got recommended, not really Prometheus was not the first recommendation. So I want to point out that we analyzed it and we decided to use Prometheus because of some reasons, not because someone told us to use Prometheus or recommended to use Prometheus. And the first thing we've talked about the labels. And at that point, we didn't have any monitoring. So we didn't know what we wanted to monitor. So we didn't have a fixed model of metrics in advance. We wanted to have something flexible to decide afterwards if it was correct or not and to evolve. So that labels and that flexibility was checked for Prometheus. There's no need for the simplicity. We wanted to test first, like, hey, let's give it a try. Prometheus, you don't need to, well, for example, since it was one of the recommendations, you need to set up a messaging system, RabbitMQ, and Redis. It was like, yeah, with Prometheus, you don't really need anything, so it's easy to test. It offers the possibility of using a DNS for service discovery, and we already had an internal DNS. So it was sort of a perfect match. Like, yeah, we can use our internal DNS for service discovery. Great. And it's easy to install and test, and the Docker image works perfectly and very simple, so we gave it a try. What we did on the very beginning, and please do not be scared, I'm going to explain some things that are really wrong, but yeah. So the first thing, we were using Ansible for deployment, so it was pretty easy for us to use Ansible to create the target list. So it was manually fed, and every time you wanted to update it, you have to rerun Ansible. Then we finally linked that service discovery with our internal DNS, which was working fine. And at that time, we only have the metrics provided by the node exporter, like this instance app and all the things you can see, but we didn't use any other exporter than that in the very beginning just for the test. But it was much better than what we had before. So there are a lot of things that are really interesting. We use also for, as I told you, we use CouchDB, and we've observed that in some situations you can lose the replication with different CouchDBs. So this was something critical for us. So for those custom metrics, we use the text file in the node exporter, which is fine to use the format, which is simple to have a bash script run by prom-based that can actually write the metrics, and you can import them directly from text file node exporter. The first alerts we had, obviously, were based on only the operation metrics from the node exporter. So hard drive usage, if an instance was up and down, and so more, but just to give you an idea. And we had absolute thresholds, like those typical ones, like hard drive usage. For our first step, it was fine. So the test was good. We liked it. So yeah, it worked. It was better than what we had before, and we kept going. Do you remember that strange thing we had? So it was for us pretty obvious how we already had all the business logic there to create another view, another publisher for Prometheus. It was pretty easy to do that. However, this is a publisher and it pushes information, and we've talked about this before. Prometheus pulls the data. So there's a solution for that, which is not what we should be doing because we should change it, but we use at that time the push gateway. You all know that it's a metrics cache, and we had some trouble because we It's our problem. It's not a Prometheus problem, but the metrics we had due to that service and that were exposed with that view, the Prometheus publisher, already were sort of aggregated. So we had to synchronize the publisher frequency with the Prometheus scraping time so as not to have duplicate data. It was our fault. I'm admitting it. We did it wrong. And the 3 metrics we had, which we already had, which were horrible. Some of them, we had more, but the 3 critical ones were incoming migration operations last 10 minutes. We even have the total suffix, which is for counter, so we did everything wrong. And we choose gauges. So we did the aggregation, and it had a lot of problems. Some of them are really funny, like the alerts kept fired unnecessarily, which we didn't know in advance because we did things wrong. Like, so if you choose that threshold and you stop receiving migrations, once the normal operation is resumed, you have to wait until that threshold is reached. And on the very beginning, you kept the alert fired and you thought that something else was failing. So at 3 a.m. in the morning, it's not something you want to happen. But yeah. So also, I've told you about the SLAs, and we have everything in high availability. And we at that time, we were only in AWS. Right now, in AWS and GC. But in AWS, we were not in the same availability zone. So we had replicas in 2 different availability zones, and also for the metric system. So this didn't work. Like, you cannot have, because how we created our publisher, which was weird, it's stateful, and you cannot have 2 replicas pushing data to the push gateway. So at that time, because it was easier, because we had another different views that we were using, we clusterized everything. I think you're noticing how complicated we're starting to do things at that time. And we clusterized it, as I told you, because we have all the different views, and yeah, it was very complicated. So at that time, we decided that things were not done correctly, and so we sat together another day and say, hey, we have to revamp this and do this more in the way it should. So this is what we had at that moment, and with everything clusterized, and there's only a primary sending data to the push gateway and Prometheus pulling data from it, but we wanted to have a proper exporter. And we didn't want to use the whole SQL important services, because you add more complexity, you have more components in between, and it's less feasible. So we wanted to do something to directly export the metrics from the source database, which is what we should have done from the very beginning. So we implemented a new standalone app with counters. So it was very easy to be Dockerized because it had no status, as Prometheus manages the aggregation and handles the resets. So it was perfect for us. And we definitely got rid of that old Prometheus publisher, and the operation exporter was much better. Also for high availability, because you can have, as it's stateless, what we created, you can have 2 or more, and Prometheus can pull the data from all of them, and you can aggregate the data like, hey, take the max for that metric from everything you receive and just one. So, which works. The metrics right now that we have, which are more obvious for the 3 main ones: operation requests total, operation status total, and operation errors total. Finally. So we could do some very nice complex metrics, rates, and everything. The alerts, right, we stopped. I mean, those are pretty obvious things for you guys, but for us was everything like, wow, mind blown. Like, instead of using absolute thresholds, you can actually predict when your hard drive is going to be full and get a warning 3 days in advance with the rate that it's getting. It's like awesome. You don't want to be awakened at 3 a.m. in the morning just because a hard drive is getting full. Well, even if it's not an emergency and someone left a debug true, something like that. The alert manager, right now, I know there's a version 4, but it was also very positive when we updated to version 1.1, as alerts were changed from a condition-based list to a condition-based tree, Similar alerts are grouped, so it made our life really easy. And the PagerDuty integration improved a lot. We're using PagerDuty, so once, for example, once an alert is solved, the PagerDuty case is closed automatically. So everything is great. So is this what we have right now? Not really. No. So you remember we had that complex view with the dashboard publisher. We got rid of that. It's very easy to set up a Grafana on top, and we'll see that, and we expect to learn a lot of it from it, but it's very easy to set up a Grafana on top of Prometheus, and it's very straightforward to have some first charts with the language is very similar to Prometheus, the PromQL. So we didn't even spend, I think, 1 day creating the dashboard. So it was very easy and very straightforward. And, oh yeah, anything missing? Do you remember we had Pingdom for monitoring all different APIs and instances? So we got a black box exporter, and even right now, kudos to Robust Perception, because they have a very nice post explaining how to do it. We even have metrics for the certificates and all the chain of certificates of their expiring date. And if you have the automated Let's Encrypt thing that you update all certificates, it's very nice to have that metric that if anything fails. So it's great. So this is something sort of what we have right now, and it works amazingly for us, and we are very happy and proud of it. It might sound like humble or simple for you guys if you have like huge companies and a lot of things to monitor. And and this is something we talked with similar sized startups, even in Spain, like, yeah, you guys have very cool things, but it's not for me. And what we wanted to share is that even if you don't have a great budget, you can have this. So right now we're monitoring 200 instances only with one Prometheus instance. In reality, we have another Grafana instance, but we could have both things in the same instance if you are very budget limited. We have one hard drive because we store a lot and we shouldn't, but we started with this configuration and we left it. And we only have one meta monitoring instance for that Prometheus. And if you guys do the number, if you have 200 instances, trust me, to have one more, it's really, really cheap. And not only the instances, but the effort we did to set it up was not as we expected. We expected that to be really harder. So some of the things we have on our backlog and that we're working it, right now we would like to we are preparing to collaborate probably with the CouchDB exporter, because right now it supports how the CouchDB is performing, but we have, as I told you, that metric that we need to know some things like, hey, is the replication still active? Because we've lost some replication and this is a mess. And right now we're still doing it with the node exporter, the text file importer, and this is something we get help with. We don't have Prometheus in HA, so this is something we definitely want to solve. It's our single point of failure, and we know about that, but yeah, we will. Another thing we're thinking of doing, we have very different projects, and some of them are very critical, some of them are normal. Right now, the alerts are in that tree, they have as condition which project this metric is coming from, but we've thought that it could be simplified is if we have different projects to have different Prometheus with their own, for every single project with their own alert system, just to separate all of them and have different conditions, different triggers, different, like, you don't want to, if you don't receive migrations for 10 minutes in that supercritical project, I want to be paid at 3 a.m. in the morning. But for a normal project, we can wait 2-3 hours, which is something that we are thinking about it. And also, you've seen that we're missing some instrumentation in our code. We only have metrics, the operation metrics and the business metric I've talked about, also black box monitoring, but we have some metrics. We are missing some metrics from what are we doing and how things are internally going. And yeah, we are very excited about it. I hope, if there's someone that I mean, this audience, everyone must be using Prometheus, but if you know anyone who has small startup that they are budget limited, and I would definitely like to serve as an example, as a use case, and encourage them to implement it and use it, because it's been awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. So we've plenty of times for questions, remarks, notes. Anybody? Ah, there.
Yeah.
I'll get my exercise here.
Hello, and thank you for the talk. How did you decide on 15 days for data retention?
It's the default. I think there was no decision behind it. Like, let's keep that, and we will. If some of you have any suggestion, we appreciate it. I think some of the things we decided were just like, hey, let's start with this, and if it's not correct, we'll modify it afterwards.
Who is actually, who thinks they have the longest retention time in the community? Okay. So, what's your story of retention?
We're having 10 years for some of the metrics, which we don't use yet, but it's the fixed plan to have at least 10 years for some of the metrics.
Wow.
Because that's something some people ask, is there actually a principal limit? And there are actually limits with indexing or something, but yeah. So we have one server at SoundCloud that is set to a year, which hasn't run for a year. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, just a brief comment to that. Of course, always be aware when you do that. Prometheus does not have this kind of clustering where you get replication. When one instance dies and at another point in time the other instance dies, they won't talk to each other to backfill their data, the gaps that they have. So only do that for data that you can lose, or run 10 Prometheus servers that you can be sure that one of them will survive 10 years. All right.
All right, coming back to Ignacio's scenario. Any more questions for him?
What were the most confusing parts of Prometheus for you when you switched to it? I guess so there was this pull model versus push, and you had to switch your model kind of, but beside that, what was really hard to get to understand?
Actually, I cannot think of any, because I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but I think it's pretty straightforward, the logic, and it's very easy to use, especially when you change to pull base and you have that automatic service, DNS by DNS discovery, and you start getting the metrics and labels. I think it's pretty intuitive for me. But to be honest and to be fair, I don't have pretty much experience with a real monitoring system, push base. I've never used in my day-to-day something big in my company. I don't know, Nagios or whatever thing you can hear of that is push-based. Maybe I'm saying something silly because I haven't used it. So for me, I haven't seen anything that it's really, really complicated.
Before you decided to go with Prometheus, did you look into alternatives, or did you just go with Prometheus right away? So could you tell a bit how the decision was made to use Prometheus as a monitoring system?
It's true that it was the first one we implemented totally. So we analyzed the other possibilities, but really implementing them, it was the first one after all the decisions. So as I said, it was easier. We didn't have to have any other different systems. It was, to start with, it was pretty straightforward, and then we stayed with it. So it was not our, we've tried Sensu for 1 month and then we've changed. So actually the first thing we really started to implement was Prometheus. So
there's no way back.
That's sort of the answer, yeah.
Okay, anybody? Corby again.
So you said you implemented DNS service discovery. What do you use for that? And how did it help you also in your other operations, or do you use it only for Prometheus?
No, we use it for other different things. And right now, I think we've changed that a little bit. Right now we're using console, and we have also some part that we did for like, yeah, we have something custom, but console.
Anybody else? My question, perhaps, you had this box, the one box that pushed to the push gateway. Why didn't you just expose Prometheus metrics on that thing?
That's because it was easier, because we already had, we already had that component that pushed the data, and the metrics were already calculated there. So there was only one view to push, and they were all already rates that we had on the publisher. So all the publishers directly pushed the data, and we didn't even think about it. I think it was sort of, we could have, had we had more experience, we thought like, hey, let's try to create this view so that it's pool-based, but at that time we just replicated what we had on the other one and tried to adapt it. So
yeah, I was just wondering if like that looked too difficult, but it was probably just an oversight then.
If we had thought about it, probably, as I said, the metrics we chose were not the correct ones. So we did everything like legacy. Like we already have this. The simplest thing is to copy that publisher and create a different publisher that just pushes the same metrics to Prometheus. Oh wait, pushes to Prometheus. That doesn't work. Oh, there's a push gateway. Solved.
Yeah, we should probably put a big fat warning sign there for many use cases that it's not for. Anyway,
exactly.
Anything else? Otherwise, like, is Matthew already here? Here he is. Would you be fine with like starting 50 minutes early, because we have plenty of time, and then we can like gain some in case we have other technical problems?